I gonna mess these notes up if I move them? Can I move them? All right. Put them back here. All right. So, like Tommy said, we are in Exodus 4, and if it's your first time here, what we do, we kind of go through the verses as a group, talk about it at our tables, and just talk about the things that jumped out. And I just got to say that I'm really thankful for this passage. And what I mean by that is I'm thankful Tommy stopped it at verse 17, because the second half of this chapter is one of the most bizarre scenes. It's like this has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about, but it's one of the most bizarre scenes. It's like 3 sentences where Moses is walking back to Egypt, and then God all of a sudden is like, I think I'm going to kill him. And you're like, the guy you just picked to lead your people out of Egypt? And then his wife cuts the foreskin off of their son, touches it to Moses' feet, and then God's like, all right, he's good. And I read this, and I'm like, what just happened? And I spent way too much time researching what that means. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the first half of, of chapter 4. Anywho, let me read this. You should have the papers at your tables. I'll read this, and then I'll give a couple of minutes for you guys to read it over again, and then discuss at your tables. All right, Exodus 4. Moses answered, "What if they do not believe me or listen to me and say the Lord did not appear to you?" Then the Lord said to him, "What is that in your hand?" "A staff," Moses replied. The Lord said, "Throw it on the ground." Moses threw it on the ground and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and take it by the tail." So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake, and it turned back into a staff in his hand. "This," said the Lord, "is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Then the Lord said, "Put your hand inside your cloak." So Moses put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, the skin was leprous. It had become as white as snow. "Now put it back into your cloak," he said. So Moses put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored, like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, "If they do not believe you or pay attention to the first sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these 2 signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water you take from the river will become blood on the ground." Moses said to the Lord, "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else." Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put words in his mouth, and I will help both of you speak and will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you, and it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so you can perform the signs with it." All right, I'll give you all just a couple minutes to kind of look over that again, make any notes, maybe paying attention to the resistance of Moses. Maybe what do you think some of the sources of that resistance and how God responds to it? And then really anything else that jumps out. So take a couple minutes, and then I'll prompt you guys, and you can start discussing it at your tables. All right, let's get back together as a group, and see what jumped out to everybody. Sounds like there's a lot of discussion, so I'm excited to hear what jumped out. I know we have a mic runner, so who wants to start? You guys were chatting. I know you've got thoughts. Oh man! All right, here we go. Up front, Nathan's up front.
I just think it's really cool that, or funny, that God asks him to grab the snake by the tail. It's like a terrible place to grab a snake. You should never grab it by the tail.
That's it. So I'm terrified of snakes. So I actually came across that I just thought grabbing a snake is a bad idea regardless. But if there's the worst place to grab it would be by the tail. And it does, that's actually it says Moses ran away. And we don't know if it's like a poisonous snake. It's not poisonous. To me, it doesn't matter. It's a snake. But it does take like a certain amount of courage to be like, all right, I'm going to grab this thing by the worst place to grab it. And all right, let's see how this goes. So yeah, good point. There we go. Thanks, Ray.
We were talking about what is it, the three aspects of snake, unclean skin, and blood. Like, is that something for the Egyptians that would speak to them, or was it for something for the Hebrews that would speak to them, or was it something that was for both? Like, why those symbols of I am God?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some of the things, I think there may not be a full consensus on it. I know some of the things that I came across was that a snake was a symbol of power and life to the Egyptians. So for Moses to take this snake by the tail and like take control of it is kind of a symbol that he's going to overcome Egypt. So that's one thing that I came across. The healing of his hand is just, it's pointing to God's power over impurity and over sin, his ability to restore. And then as far as the water to blood from the Nile, that is going to be the first plague. That's as far as I got in the research, so I'm not sure after that. That's a good question, though. Who else? I like the hustle.
So just the fact that he was so obedient to just do what God said immediately, that was like a really big lesson to not hesitate when God says, do this, no matter how crazy it sounds, to just be obedient.
When he said grab the snake?
Grab the snake, walk through the sea, here come walk on the water. Just if he asks you to do something, just to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say that he definitely quickly, I guess we don't really know, grab the snake. I actually sense some hesitation in Moses in this passage, though. I think he, and we'll talk about some of the reasons of why that might be, or maybe you guys have some thoughts, but I definitely do sense a wrestling here that Moses is trying to figure out, like, why me can actually do this. And we'll talk about that a little bit more.
So I just think it's really interesting where the Lord's anger burned against Moses, yet he gave him a helper.
Yeah.
Like, he was like, oh, I'm really angry, but here's my mercy.
Yeah.
Like, which one is it, Lord? Thank you. So I just think it's very interesting, like, that part.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, when I burn with anger, I usually break something. I don't, like, respond. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me either. So there's something about the character of God where he has this anger burning. And I think it's not like a vengeful anger that, like, kind of we feel like we got to, some commentators describe it as a divine zeal to complete his purpose. And despite feeling that he's able, like you said, to be merciful, to continue to accommodate this resistance from Moses, and he gives him his brother to help out. All right, maybe one more? Essence.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering, because Moses kind of gives two opposition to this. First, it's like the opposition is the people. Like, what if they don't believe me? But then after God kind of gives him, well, these are the things that you will do and they will believe you. Then it's like, well, actually, like, there's an insecurity there. So I'm wondering if you think that it's actually both. Like, if the first question was really a concern, or was the real true concern an insecurity of himself?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I'll talk some about that in a moment. But I think we see a progression in the resistance from Moses. I think going back to chapter 3, when he first says, well, like, who am I to lead my people? I think Moses, there is like a humility in it, and a lot of teachings, especially like rabbinic teachings, talk about this profound humility that Moses has, because he knows like what he's up against in this. So that's a big call. And then he asks about, well, what if they don't believe me? So he starts to look a little bit more internally. It's like, well, who am I to be the one to do this? And then God does these miracles, and then he's like, well, like all of these other things, and now fear starts to come in. So I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I think it's both. I think it starts with a place of humility, and this happens to us a lot too, I think, where it's like, who am I? And then we start to find reasons. Well, no, fear. I messed up before. I can't do this. So I think it's both. All right. Well, let me jump in. I'll give a few thoughts. I'll pray really quick, and then I'll get started. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for the way you're moving. Lord, I just pray that you continue to move. I pray that you touch hearts with my words, despite my words. We love you, Jesus. Amen. So it's hard to read this passage and not think about the concept of calling. So I was thinking a lot about calling in my life, and especially early on, and really for most of my life, I felt that the call on my life was baseball. I'm a huge baseball fan. I've always been that way since I was really little. I played in Little League, and I played in middle school and high school, went on and played in college. And I had dreams of going and playing, Major League Baseball. And everything I did in life was filtered through that lens of how do I get to play Major League Baseball. And I went to college, and I learned pretty quickly that I think I overshot. I don't think I'm going to be a professional baseball player. But I just pivoted a little bit. I stuck with baseball. And when I graduated from school, I turned to broadcasting. So I did play-by-play for a minor league baseball team. And my dreams switched from playing in the big leagues to calling games, to broadcasting games in the big leagues. So I did that for 4 or 5 years. And then I just felt like that wasn't where I was supposed to be anymore. I felt like God was calling me somewhere else. And that call was really clear. I needed to leave sports. What was not clear was what I needed to do next, because I had only ever pursued baseball, and I had no clue what was next for me. I didn't have any idea. I talked to friends, talked to family, I prayed about it, and I just wanted to know. Everybody wants to know, what is that call in my life? What's my purpose? What should I be aiming for? So one day I was online, and I came across this personality career test that was supposed to tell you your ideal career. Now, I don't really like tests like this in general, but I was very desperate, and it was also free. So I went with it. So I was like, all right, let me try it. So I take this test, and it took like an hour for me to answer all these questions. And when I'm doing it, I'm like, all right, I kind of like these questions. This might be okay. So I finally get done with it. I click results, and it shows me, my strengths, my weaknesses, my personality, and I'm like, dang, this thing gets me. Like, this is really accurate. This might be informative. So I'm looking, I'm like, all right, here, click here to find your ideal career. So I click it. It says, to find your ideal career, pay $19.99. And I was just like, that sounds about right. So I'm like, all right, whatever. I've done it, sunk an hour into this. I think it's going to be good. So I'm like, all right, pay the money. And I click it. And it says, your ideal career, waste management supervisor. As Tommy so eloquently put it when I told him this story, he said, so it told you your career was trash. That's what, yeah. That's it. Glad I paid that $20. So no offense to anyone who works in waste management, but that is definitely not what I am called to do. So calling is this universal desire, right? We want to know our calling. Christian or non-Christian, we all want to know what we're called to. Now, our society says that calling is pretty much synonymous with career. Society will say that calling is like playing Major League Baseball. It's something that perfectly aligns with your passions and your desires and your skills, and calling is ultimately about what makes you happy. But as Jesus followers, we know that calling is a whole lot more than just your vocation. And it can be uncomfortable. It can be costly. If Moses is an example, calling can be scary and dangerous, and we might completely lack the qualifications to do it. And there's a really good chance that the calling that God has placed on your heart, you're just not going to want to do it. We'll go to house church, we'll come to day one here, and we'll be nice to our neighbors, but take a dangerous risk? I don't know. Maybe we're even scared to truly ask God about calling because we're scared of what he might actually say to us. For some of us, he might ask us to take a risk. For others, he might tell you just to sit still. We're so quick to resist calling. We focus on our own insecurities, our own fears. But if we're able to obediently step out in faith, I think we'll find that calling isn't even really about us. Calling is just a pathway to experience God's power and presence in new ways. And to experience God and to know him more deeply, that's what we want more than anything else. Calling is a pathway to experience God's power and presence in new ways. But despite how much we want that, stepping into calling is not always easy. Take Moses for an example. I mentioned self-doubt as a reason why we don't step into calling, but kind of like some of the questions Essence was asking, I don't think Moses' resistance started with insecurity. I think his hesitation came from the reality of what he was up against. He grew up in Egypt, so he had a firsthand knowledge of the power, control, and domination of Pharaoh. Moses was one man with no power, no influence. How could he possibly be the one to do something as profound as leading the Israelites out of captivity from the empire that enslaved them for hundreds of years? Do you ever feel paralyzed by the size of the problem? Do you ever get hit with waves of hopelessness as you work to alleviate suffering, but you just see more suffering? We have several people in our house church that are involved in the foster care system, and I hear their stories about a system that is overwhelmed, it is understaffed, and very little hope of ever getting better. And it can be immobilizing. And when we're faced with the reality of a seemingly insurmountable problem, my prayer is that we focus on God. But so often, we start to look at ourselves. And that's exactly what Moses did in chapter 4. And he asked God, well, what if the elders don't believe me? Even though God already told him that the elders would. And then God performs the miracles, but Moses finds more reasons why he can't answer the call. He says, I'm slow of speech and tongue. I'm not eloquent. God ensures he will teach Moses what to say, but it doesn't matter at this point. Now Moses isn't just wrestling with doubt, he's wrestling with all of his past failures. Just remember, Moses tried to save just one person before, and it ended up in murder, leading to a 40-year self-imposed exile. And you can almost sense Moses' mind replaying that scene from Exodus 2 where the Hebrews are arguing, he tries to intervene, and then they say to Moses, who made you ruler and judge over us? Moses can't even get two random Hebrews to listen to him. How's he going to persuade the elders that he's the guy, let alone Pharaoh, to let the entire nation of Israel go? Has God ever put a call in your life that you think you're completely incapable of fulfilling? Maybe it's not even something that big, but the more you think about it, the more reasons you find that you can't do it. Have you ever tried to start something new and it just completely tanks? And then you're hesitant to try it again. Or maybe God put someone on your heart and you tried striking up a conversation, but it got awkward, you didn't know the right things to say, and now you just can't possibly imagine taking that risk again. Or maybe you've been deeply wounded. You were obedient to Jesus, you walked vulnerably towards the call, and it led you straight into betrayal and heartbreak. It's those types of experiences that can lead us to abandon reasoning, and then we just start pleading. Kind of like Moses did next when he said, please, Lord, send someone else. And it's in this place of raw honesty and desperation that hopefully we once again lean back into God. See, whether we accept God's call right off the bat or we resist and resist some more, God will continue to draw us to himself. I said calling is a pathway to experience God in new ways, and I think that's true because calling isn't about us. It's about the caller and our dependence on him. So our oldest son, Rio, he's 4. And a couple of summers ago, we took him to swim lessons every weekend in the summer. And he loved the water, and he was getting really good at it and getting skilled and getting confident in the water, and it was great. So this past summer, we took him to his cousin's house, and they have a pool. And I'm thinking, he probably remembers most of it, or at least some of the swim lessons. He did not. That kid looked like he had never been in a pool before. I was like, dang. Oh, all right. I guess I'll get in with him. So I got in the pool with him, and he was having more fun. And there's this one moment where he was standing on the side of the pool, like on a step, and he was just like falling to me and having fun. But then I took a step back, and Rio froze. And I took another step back, and then Rio started to panic. He's like, Daddy, no, where are you going? Where are you going? Daddy, come closer. What are you doing, Daddy? And I can see it in his face. He's like looking at the water, and I can just see his mind just like, don't know what that is. I can see his mind just like churning and realizing like he does not know how to swim. And he's terrified. So finally, like I walk back up to him and I take his face in my hands and I'm like, hey, buddy, you're okay. I got you. I'm not going to let you sink. I got you. And he started to calm down a little bit. So I backed up again. And he was looking at me this time. He's like, you're going to catch me, right? I said, yeah, buddy, I'm going to catch you. So then he jumped. He really like fell because I wasn't that far away from him, but he jumped. See, the more that Rio focused on the water and his lack of ability, the more scared he got. Rio just didn't suddenly realize he could do it himself. Like he would have sunk like a rock. Rio's confidence to jump came from one thing. His father was there with him. Every objection or question Moses raised, we see God either directly or indirectly reminding Moses that the reason he can be confident in this call has nothing to do with Moses and everything to do with God being with him. See, as much as this passage is about calling, it's more about God, his character, his care for us, and how he will not leave us. Eventually, all of Moses' objections caused God to burn with anger. But he was still patient and accommodating, allowing Aaron to go with Moses. God, Yahweh, the source of our calling, is abundantly patient with us, full of grace and mercy, allowing us to wrestle with our own internal struggles and not giving up on us, leading us back to him. Sometimes, like Rio, we just need a few reminders that God's with us. And I think that's why at the very end of this passage, God is sure to tell Moses, but take this staff in your hand. The staff is a tangible reminder that God is not sending Moses alone. When we pursue calling, the staff reminds us that God is with us. Secondly, I think the staff reminds us that God, he's going to use whatever we have, no matter how small. In the Exodus story, the staff is a simple, ordinary, unimpressive shepherd's stick. But we'll learn later in the story, when used by God, the staff becomes a powerful tool in the liberation of the Israelites. Maybe God is calling you to start having spiritual conversations with people or lead a Bible study, but you don't have any kind of formal training, you don't have any experience, and you feel resistant to the call. God used a simple shepherd stick to help lead his people out of Egypt, and he'll use whatever you have too. If God's calling you to moms with small kids or young professionals or the homeless or the LGBTQ community, but you don't have any formalized plans or a place to meet, or maybe you only know one other person in that group, remember the staff, and he'll use what you have. So Kaylee and I lead a house church at our place called Central House. And we do not live on Central Avenue. We live on Highland Avenue. But we kept the name when we took over leadership of it. As many of you know, it was started by Allison Hopt many, many years ago. And the origins of Central House are very simple. Allison one day just started hanging out with her neighbor. There was no major plan. There was no kids curriculum. There was no building, structural building other than their house. There wasn't fancy. She just intentionally spent time with her neighbor. And this eventually became numerous iterations over many years, an endless amount of people living in their home, probably like 90% of the underground, I think, lived with the Hops at one point. And just countless moments of laughter and tears and transformation. And now, over a decade later, Kaylee and I are still seeing God move in the Central House community. Central House will always be a pivotal place in my family's journey with Jesus and so many other people and families. And I am so abundantly grateful for what Allison started all those years ago, just by talking to her neighbor. When you feel insecure in your calling or you're not equipped, remember the staff. God will use what you have. Finally, what I think might be the most mysterious and the incredible part about all of this is not only does God use what we have, not only is he with us, but he gives us access to his power. So in the Exodus story, Moses' staff, it's not just symbolic. It's a physical manifestation of God's power. So Moses is going to use the staff to initiate the 10 plagues. He's going to split the Red Sea, a bunch of other miracles. See, God doesn't call us into the world, into spiritual battles, empty-handed. He sends us with his power. And displays of his power, while magnificent in their own right, are really just opportunities to experience God in new ways. So if we jump ahead in the story, the crescendo moment in the Israelites being liberated from the Egyptians is when Moses used the staff to part the Red Sea. And the Israelites walk through to safety, the Egyptians are washed away, and when the Israelites get to the other side, they sing what is the first recorded song of praise in the Bible. And some biblical commentators suggest that this is actually the first time that Moses and the Israelites know God as rescuer on a large scale. See, there are a number of occasions where the Lord had rescued individuals. But it wasn't until Exodus that God showed up to rescue an entire nation of his people. And God told Abraham, back in Genesis 15, God told Abraham about this. He said he was going to rescue his people. So it's likely true that the Israelites had a piece of intellectual knowledge that God is a rescuer. But it wasn't until the Exodus that his people experienced God as rescuer. And experiencing and knowing are two very different things. So Kaylee and I were part of the group that went to the Philippines about a year and a half ago. And whenever somebody from that group comes up and talks, we almost always reference it because it was just so impactful. One of the most impactful trips that I've ever been on. And a lot of things stood out in that trip, but one of them, maybe the biggest, was just how generous the people, our friends in Manila, are. These are people that had gone through, and some were going through, loss, pain, suffering, and were so incredibly joyful. It's people that were in deep poverty, $1, $2 a day, but were abundantly generous. They would literally give shirts off their back. They would give us whatever they had to make sure that we were comfortable. And you couldn't stop them from doing it. You could not tell them no. You were going to be given. Like they were going to give to you. It was incredible. And when we were over there, we studied a lot of different verses, but there was one that really jumped out to me. It won't be on the screen. It's 2 Corinthians 8. So just listen. And it says this. In the midst of a very severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. Entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the Lord's people. See, I'd read that verse before, and I had a knowledge of what I thought that type of generosity looked like. I was even misguided enough to think that I embodied that type of generosity from time to time. What an idiot. But it wasn't until I obediently followed God's call to Manila that I experienced that radical generosity. Not watered down American Western generosity, but I had a firsthand experience of the fully selfless, generous heart of God displayed through our friends in Manila. We don't just want to know about God. We want to experience him. Calling is the pathway to experience God in new ways. So follow God's voice in a calling. Take the risk, and you may experience a part of God's heart for the first time. And this should be the heart song of our life. We want to know God more deeply. Yes, we want to be obedient. Yes, we want freedom for the captives. Yes, we want healing to come. But more than anything, I want union with God. I want to know and experience God in new ways so I can know him more intimately today than I did yesterday. You know, if we skip way ahead from Exodus all the way in the story to Acts 2, the day of Pentecost, we find another fire that doesn't consume. It's not a bush this time, but it's the apostles with tongues of fire resting on them as God fills them with his Holy Spirit. In Exodus, God places his power in a staff. In Acts, he places his power in his people. The same God who called Moses out of the desert now calls his church into the world, to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. A calling that does not rely on human strength, but on the presence and power of the Spirit that God so graciously gives us. Now, for some of you, possibly for many of you, you're in the middle of answering the call. You're stepping obediently towards Jesus. You're seeing God use the small things. You know God is with you, but you need to see his power. You need our rescuer to break the chains of addiction. You need the Prince of Peace to bring shalom to your life that's filled with chaos and disorder. You need peace in your heart. You need El Shaddai to repair that marriage that seems hopeless or rescue that friend or family member that seems too far gone. You need Jehovah Rapha to bring healing after the diagnosis. You know, as I wrap up, and Emily, you can come on up. I want to speak on healing a little bit. This is something that God has really put on my heart for a long time, but it's ramped up quite a bit in the last 6 to 8 months or so. And I think many of you here may feel a similar desire, a similar burning in you. And for me, it's a desire to see and experience God's power, specifically his miraculous power to heal. And to be honest with you guys, I have a somewhat difficult relationship with the miraculous. I didn't grow up in church. I grew up in a very heady, academic, science-focused town in East Tennessee. And maybe that has a role to play in this. But when I hear stories of miracles, stories of healing, if I'm honest with you guys, my initial gut reaction is skepticism. And I don't want to be skeptical. But I know I am. I can feel it. See, I know God can heal. But I haven't experienced it yet. Not on a spiritual, physical overlap kind of way. And I also feel a lot of fear when I think about praying for healing. My mom is not a Christian. And she's been through a lot of loss in her life. Before I was born, her youngest brother, Neil, passed away from leukemia. And then 6 months later, shortly after my older brother was born, her mom passed away from ovarian cancer. So her baby brother dies. And then 6 months later, shortly after my mom becomes a mom for the first time, her mother dies. And I remember I was home a while ago, and I was looking through just some old stuff, and I came across an old diary of my mom's. And I opened it up. I didn't really know what it was, but I happened to open up to a page, an entry around this time in her life. And she wrote about how much she missed her mom and needed her mom. And she wrote that she prayed every day for God to heal her mom. But he didn't. And for so long, my mom held a tremendous amount of resentment towards God for that. And through the grace of God, my mom doesn't know it, but God has helped to release some of that, but some of that resentment I think is still there. But it was so acute for her for so long. I know God can heal. I know that he might not. And I am so scared that if I pray for healing and he doesn't do it, that I'm going to resent God. And I don't want to resent God. But lately, the hunger to experience God in this new way has started to outsize my fear. See, physical healing to me, it's like a room in God's house that I just haven't been in yet. Part of me might be skeptical it's there. Part of me might be scared to walk towards it. But most of me wants to enter it and experience God in a new way. Last quick story, and then I'm done. 2 or 3 years ago, there was a microchurch conference in Gainesville. And one of the breakout sessions, a big group of us was there, and one of the breakout sessions was on physical healing. So I was like, ooh, I gotta go to that one. And I went to it, and the guy that presented was just so humble and genuine, and the way he presented it, all this about physical healing, it drew me in. And I had so many questions about it when he was talking about it. I'm like, but I chickened out, and I didn't ask any of the questions in the workshop. But I thought, okay, I'm going to find him. I'm going to track him down after in the conference, and I'll ask him. But I never found him. Fast forward a few years, the Underground is looking for a new executive director. And there's this guy from Pennsylvania that's coming down to visit. And I remember him walking in and looking at him and being like, he looks familiar. And then after the service, he sat with a group of us just to so we could get to know him a little bit. And the whole time he's talking, I'm like, where do I know this guy from? And then eventually it hits me. That's the guy from Gainesville in the physical healing workshop. So after we got done, I walked up to him. I'm like, Joel, this might be really awkward, but did you lead a workshop in Gainesville about physical healing a few years ago? He's like, yeah, that was me. I was like, no way. And I kind of told him parts of the story and said, well, I'd love to sit down with you. If you get the job, good luck. I'd love to sit down with you. And the next parts of the story, he did. And I was able to sit down with Joel and have some really meaningful conversations. And then Joel, for the first time he preaches here, he talked about God's manifest presence. And guys, I'm telling you, when he talked about that, it was like putting language to all these desires in my heart that I just couldn't quite articulate. And it matched up with what he was saying, that desire. I'm like, yes, that's what I want. And now today, I'm speaking about God's power. Look, I don't know what all of this means, but I know God is calling. I know he's moving. I know that calling is not about competence, it's about encounter. And I know I'm hungry for an encounter with his manifest presence. I know many of you feel that hunger too. And maybe some of you don't feel that hunger, and that's okay. Maybe you want to feel that desire. And if that's you, remember the staff. God uses what you have. The desire for the desire is enough. For those that do feel the fire in them, know that hunger is the first sign. God is up to something in this community. But also know that hunger for prolonged periods of time is uncomfortable. And there can be this tendency to pull away after a while or to not be as attentive to it. Friends, I'm urging you today to resist that feeling and continue to lean in to that desire. Maybe that means praying for healing. Maybe it means taking that risk God is asking for you to do. Maybe it means just waiting or spending more time around the poor or having more conversations about God's manifest presence. I don't know. But whatever lean in means to you, may we be a community that never tires of hungering for Jesus. Whether he comes today or it takes him 40 years, may we be a community that never stops creating space with joyful expectation that our God is going to show up. He is going to be our rescuer. He is going to be our healer. He is going to be our Father. So as you go about your week, go with the echoes of Psalm 23. As we walk down the challenging roads of calling, we shall fear no evil because he is with us. May his rod and staff comfort us. Surely his goodness and love will follow us all the days of our lives, and we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.